So good morning. We're going to be washing our pigment today. This is the rough pigment that we ground up a couple videos back, and I'm just going to keep it in this jar for now. I'll show you how we wash them. You'll need a lid. And you might want to start with the bigger jar. The dust coming up, you don't want to breathe that. I'm going to give it a few seconds for the heavier parts to fall and settle on the bottom. All this colored water is what we're aiming for. So we're not going to dump the jar, we're going to leave this sludge in the bottom and wash it again. And this is going to be the last rinse. And my jar's smaller, so I'm not going to fill it up. The one I have left. You can get as many jars as you need to do this. Just make sure it's showing the jars. And then we're going to keep this part to grind it again later. And I'll leave the top off so it can evaporate too. And what I'll do is leave those on the counter and let them settle. And I'll come back in an hour and show you how much is settled and see how much we have left to go. And I'll tell you about the trick I use when they don't seem to be settling very quickly. I mean, a day, 2 days is reasonable, but any longer than that, I'll add something to it to help it settle out. I also have some brown rock that I had ground up, and I want to wash this so I can make a brown paint. So I'll get more jars. I keep a lot of jars on hand just for this sort of thing. Here we have pigment settling. You have to warn people who come to your house not to assume you've got chocolate milk or anything else on the counters or in the refrigerator once you've started making the paints. All right, so this is overnight. The brown pigment is ready to pour the water off. If you can see the yellow, yeah, the yellow back here is still settling out. If I had some alum on hand, I'd make a solution of alum and put a few drops in each jar, and that would probably settle that out. But I'm out of it, so it's just gonna have to sit until it settles. Maybe tomorrow. But the next thing I do is I've got the tiny jars here, and I'm going to pour the water out of these and pour the sediment into the tiny jars. Now, while the sediment's wet, it takes up a lot more space than it will once it's dry, and there will always be water coming up on the top of these jars that I'll continue to pour off as it continues to settle out. Pouring it out is going to stir it up a little bit. And go very slowly. This can go down the sink because we are not pouring out the sand. Go very slow so you don't lose your pigment. Alright, so there's still water in it, but if I pour it all out, then I won't be able to get my pigment out without dumping it. So I'm going to stir that back up. And I'm going to pour it into my tiny jars. And I'll let it settle again in there. And I'm going to rinse this last bit out of here because I don't want to lose that. This is where the smooth pigment is in the settled jars. That's about it for that one. So these two are going to settle again, and when they do, I'll pour the water off of the top of those two. Once I have all the jars water poured off, except for the last one, I will consolidate these into probably one little tiny jar. And that won't be much pigment, but it's enough to make a few pans of watercolor, or I'll save it up until I can crush more brown rock and make a tube of oil paint. If you have a lot more pigment, 4-ounce jars would be better. And you can see the ones that I've already poured are already starting to separate. That one doesn't have very much in it. But that'll settle out again, and then I'll pour the rest of the water on the tiny jars off. You can see this is already starting to separate, so I'll leave those sit there a few hours and let them clarify on top, and then pour the water out of those jars or use a dropper to get the water out. When I'm in the tiny jars, I usually do use a dropper. I'll show you that when I come back. And we're going to leave the yellow ones to sit another day. That's it for now. You can also see that some of the pigment did go into the sink. So I'll use a paper towel to wipe that up before I rinse out the sink. There's too much water in the jar, so I'm just showing you how I would use a dropper if I were. I'm going to pour it. Once the water's poured off of the jars, then I'm going to consolidate them into less jars. And I'll keep doing this as I can pour more water off until I've got each of the jars as full as I can. You can see the yellow ones in the back are done. They're ready to pour. But I've got these 3 jars with the brown pigment in it that I'm going to pour first. Take the rest of the water out of them. I'm going to use the 4-ounce jars for the yellow pigment because I know I will have more of it. Or I should. This is the heavy portion, the sediment that was in the original jar for the yellow pigment. And this is the sediment that's in the jar from the brown pigment. Pour a little of the water off of it and a ladybug too. And set those back aside to dry out. I'll take this bowl outside now and dump it over the balcony. I'm washing the jars now, and I'm making sure to wash them into this bowl. Now the colored water in the bowl isn't going to matter when it comes time to dump it, but I will not dump the entire bowl. You'll see some of the sand in the bottom when I'm done. So once I get the pigment reduced down to just a few jars, I put them in the dehydrator. The lid isn't going to fit down snug on the dehydrator, but it'll still move air, a little warmed air, more quickly to dry it out than it would if I just left them on the counter. So if you do leave them on the counter because you don't have a dehydrator or don't want to put them in the dehydrator, put a screen or something over the top of your jars, because if you have ladybug invasions the way we do, Chinese ladybugs, they will get in your paint jars. So I put them in here and I just rest the lid on top, and that empty jar is just to balance out the other 2 of the taller jars because they won't sit on it all the way down. So I'll put it on the lowest setting and run it for a few days. Every day I will take out more, whatever liquid has settled, sediment settled, more water will be on top, and I'll use a dropper to get that water out. And once it's dry, I'll show you what I do with them after that.